On April 6, 2017, in Urbana, Ohio, a chilling 911 call came in from a 14-year-old boy. "I just killed my mom." The caller was Donovan Nicholas, and the victim was Heidi Taylor, his father's longtime girlfriend. But what made the call even more disturbing was Donovan's explanation. "I swear it wasn't me. It was Jeff. Jeff is inside me." From that moment, the case spiraled into one of the most bizarre and haunting juvenile murder cases in Ohio history, where mental illness, internet horror stories, and a fractured identity collided in deadly fashion. Donovan Nicholas grew up in Urbana, Ohio, alongside his stepmother, Heidi Taylor, his stepsister, Alyssa Taylor, and his stepbrother, Todd. His father, Shane Nicholas, had been in a relationship with another woman in the late 90s and early 2000s, but this relationship wasn't meant to last. After Donovan's birth, mother exited the picture sometime shortly after he was born. Shane, Donovan's father, became Donovan's legal guardian after making it through what was likely a pretty messy breakup. Shane had begun to date again. He'd met Heidi Taylor way back in 1993, and it seems that the two were in contact with each other on and off ever since then. We don't know the specifics of how everything unfolded, but we know that Shane and Heidi became official sometime in 2005. They never actually married, but they moved in together around this time, and Donovan began referring to Heidi as his mom. After all, she was the only mother he'd ever known. After his birth, mother walked out of his life when he was less than 3 years old. Heidi Taylor has been described by everyone who knew her as a loving mother and an all-around great person. Her daughter, Alyssa, often described her mother as her best friend, and it seems that the two were inseparable. It's not uncommon, after someone has passed away, for people to forget all of the negative aspects of that person's life and whitewash them as being the perfect person. But in Heidi's case, it doesn't seem like anyone had anything negative to say about her whatsoever, both when she was alive and when she passed. Well, everyone except for Donovan. Unfortunately, Donovan Nicholas wasn't always the perfect son that Heidi and Shane had hoped for. I can't say this with any certainty, but it seems that Donovan may have held a deep resentment toward his birth mother for walking out on him, as well as his stepmother for trying her best to fill her shoes. All we know for sure is that Heidi did her best to raise Donovan, spending just as much time with him as she spent with her birth children. Donovan was never considered second-rate, nor was he pushed aside in exchange for the children that Heidi had naturally birthed. But for Donovan, it seemed like, whatever Heidi tried, it just wasn't enough. We know the two got into arguments off and on, but I can't tell if these arguments were frequent, or if they were the typical arguments that parents get into with almost every teenager, unfortunately, since this case began to make headlines and become more public. Shane, Donovan's father, opted out of every opportunity for an interview or a public comment. I'm really doing my best here to piece together what Donovan's early life would have looked like using clues I've found in public records and on social media. But without Shane being around to confirm all of this, it's really nothing more than conjecture. With that said, from the outside, the Nicholas and Taylor household appeared to be your average American family. Everyone was happy most of the time, and they lived on a decent enough income to make ends meet and keep everyone satisfied. And for a small family in Urbana, Ohio, that's about all you could ask for. A dirty little secret. April 6, 2017 was a day like any other for Donovan and his mother, Heidi. They were hanging out at the family's home that day, with Donovan being busy on his phone while Heidi attended to other things around the home. According to reports from prosecutors, Donovan had been texting a girl who lived out of state. The two seemed to have been engaged in an online relationship for at least a few months, with their relationship beginning to heat up over the last couple of weeks. As their relationship grew, They began to share intimate details with one another, and this eventually grew to them sharing private photos as well. The only problem is that Donovan was just 14 years old at the time, and his parents had no clue that he'd become so involved with this girl. You can imagine her surprise when Heidi uncovered that the two had been sharing provocative photos back and forth on the afternoon of April 6th. She was naturally outraged that Donovan would have been doing something like this, and she immediately took his phone away, waiting to tell his father about this when he returned home, presumably later that day. Donovan became incredibly angry about this, but it also seems that he was probably embarrassed as well. His mother had just uncovered his dirty little secret and planned to put an end to what Donovan perceived to be a potential long-term relationship. The two got into a serious argument about the situation, and Donovan eventually stormed off. Heidi continued on with her daily tasks, but for Donovan, this argument wasn't over. He planned to have the last word, the murder a short while later. Donovan devised a plan to get back at his stepmother. After all, in his eyes, she'd always treated him as second best. He never felt that he was good enough in the eyes of Heidi, and he'd finally reached a breaking point. Something inside of Donovan shifted that day, something none of his family members or friends could have ever expected. What was already a bad day for Donovan and his mother was about to get far, far worse. Later that afternoon, Donovan quietly slipped into the kitchen of the home when Heidi wasn't looking. He grabbed a knife from a kitchen drawer and snuck it into the upstairs bedroom of the home. He crept inside the bedroom and hid behind the door, knowing that at some point Heidi would come into the room, giving him the opportunity he'd been waiting for 4 years. Unfortunately, his plan worked. Heidi came into the bedroom just a few minutes later, completely unaware of Donovan's hiding place. As she had her back turned, Donovan jumped out from behind the door, knife in hand, and began to hack away at his mother. Once he was satisfied with what he had done, he stopped and took a breather. His mother tried to escape to a different room of the home, but Donovan soon followed and began attacking her again. All the while, Heidi was pleading with her son to stop and call an ambulance for help, but Donovan ignored her cries. After a few brief moments, Donovan made the decision to end his mother's pain once and for all, grabbing a weapon from his parents' bedroom and ending his mother's suffering with a single round. At some point during the attack, Donovan managed to injure himself, wounding his leg to the point that he could no longer walk. It was then that he decided to call 911, asking the dispatcher to send someone to his aid. The 911 call is utterly heartbreaking, but it's also incredibly important to the case because Donovan never admitted guilt for what he had done. Instead, he blamed someone else, a voice in his head that belonged to an infamous serial killer from internet folklore, Jeff the Killer. The story of Jeff the Killer first popped up online back in 2011, when a terrifying photo was posted by an amateur artist, alongside a story that documented the fictional origins of the photo. According to urban legend, Jeff was the name of a 13-year-old boy who'd been bullied all of his life. As the years ticked by, his bullies grew worse and worse, and they began to attack him in ways that are unimaginable. This all reached a boiling point one day when his bullies attempted to claim Jeff's life. Jeff was left permanently disfigured by the bullies after they burned him, leaving terrible scars behind that made him appear similar to the Joker from the Batman film, The Dark Knight. Soon after, Jeff had a mental breakdown and enacted revenge against his former bullies. But not only that, he took out his rage on his parents as well, killing them both. In a final bid to right the wrongs of his bullies, Jeff carved a smile into his own face so that he'd never have to frown again. He was later picked up by police when they uncovered his crimes, labeling him as a serial killer This is the story that seems to have led to Donovan Nicholas' belief that he'd been overcome by Jeff the killer. But this is where many investigators can't seem to agree. Was Donovan truly afflicted by mental illness that caused him to have these disturbing delusions? Or was he a cold-hearted murderer who simply wanted revenge against his mother after she punished him by taking his cell phone? But Donovan Nicholas' 911 call seems to suggest that he may have made up the entire story about being overcome by the spirit of Jeff the killer. He began the call by telling the dispatcher that he had killed his own mother. But just a moment later, he recants this confession and suggests that Jeff did it. Several people online have also been quick to point out that, near the end of the call, the dispatcher asks why he did it. Or rather, why Jeff did it. This is where things get really creepy and change the whole narrative of the story. Nicholas tells the dispatcher he was always tired of her. She always did drugs and totally ignored me. Once she hit me, she was done. Notice how he shifts perspectives midway through the statement. He begins by saying Jeff was always tired of her, but he ends his statement by speaking of himself in first person again, explaining how frustrated he was with his mother, and the anger in his voice is palpable. This doesn't appear to have been an issue with Donovan having a split personality. This appears to have been an issue with Donovan claiming his mother's life in a blind fit of rage. Donovan was picked up by police and taken in for questioning, and it doesn't seem like police had any patience with him. Most of the deputies who have spoken about the case saying that Donovan doesn't appear to have shown signs of mental illness. He purely appeared to be a liar. However, Donovan was assessed by two separate forensic psychologists during his trial, and both of these psychologists suggested that Donovan had underlying mental health issues, with one of these psychologists suggesting he may have suffered from a type of dissociative identity disorder, essentially a disorder that causes people to possess two or more personalities. What's really interesting about this disorder is that it doesn't present itself the way you might think. Television and movies may lead you to believe that when you have a did episode, you black out and have no idea what's going on. But that's not actually the case. Many people who suffer from did report that they are fully aware of what's going on when they're having an episode, but they're unable to control themselves or stop the event from happening. It's sort of like having your mind hijacked by someone you don't even know. You're a first-hand witness to everything going on, but you're just as powerless as the victim, and, in a way, you become a victim yourself. But here's where things get even more crazy. The jury didn't buy 1 second of this. In fact, they believed Donovan was lying as well. Regardless of what the mental health professionals claimed about Donovan's mental disorders, the jury decided that it was all made up, and they convicted him of murder, with the judge handing down a sentence of 25 years to life. But Donovan's defense team wasn't finished with the case just yet. What really sets this case apart from similar cases is that, you have to remember, Donovan was just 14 years old when the crime took place. Thus, he was sent to juvenile court. But immediately after the juvenile court reviewed his case, they escalated it to the adult court system, claiming that the juvenile court wasn't capable of properly reviewing Donovan's case because of his mental illness. Thus, he was tried as an adult. But thanks to a loophole in the system, Donovan's defense team was able to successfully reverse his conviction. I'm not going to pretend to understand all the ins and outs of this process, but as of December of 2022, Donovan's murder conviction was reversed, and he's now being sent back to juvenile court and will be tried again, but this time as a minor. This would mean that Donovan may be a free man again much sooner than anyone expected. When the court ruled that Donovan Nicholas would be released at age 21, Heidi Taylor's family was devastated. To them, justice had not been served. Heidi's daughter stood before reporters, tears in her eyes. My mother was murdered in cold blood. Donovan planned it. He ambushed her, stabbed her, and shot her. And now they let him go? To the family, it didn't matter how young Donovan was or what mental condition he claimed to have. What mattered was that a life had been taken, a woman who had raised children, loved deeply, and posed no threat to anyone. They also criticized the system, arguing that the law seemed to prioritize the rights of the killer over the pain of the victim's family. Where is Heidi's justice? Her brother asked during an interview. She's gone forever, and he walks. Free, the family has continued to speak out, hoping to bring more awareness to victims' rights in juvenile crime cases. For them, this isn't just about Donovan, it's about a system they feel is broken. Donovan served time until he turned 21 and is now a free man. But the questions remain. Did the system fail Heidi? Can someone that young truly be held accountable for such a brutal act? And how do we balance justice with compassion? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to hear more real stories that challenge the justice system and explore the darkest corners of the human mind, don't forget to like and subscribe Crimes Recalled.